Hello and welcome to the Bearded Tits podcast. I'm your host Jack Perks, and this week I'm going to be talking to Tom Horton of Tunnus UK. This is a project that is studying bluefin tuna off the British coastline. Now, I've mentioned tuna in around 4 podcasts, so to say that I'm excited to waffle about fish is an understatement. I'm always happy to waffle about fish. However, first we're going to cover the news. Now, 60% of fish species could be unable to survive in current areas by 2100. 2100? 2100, however you say that year. If global warming reaches a worst case scenario of 4 to 5 Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures, researchers have found. In a study of nearly 700 fresh and saltwater fish species, researchers examined how warming water temperatures lower water oxygen levels, putting embryos and pregnant fish at risk. That scenario still puts fish which are also economically and ecologically important at risk, including Atlantic cod, swordfish, Pacific salmon, Alaska pollock, and Pacific cod, which is used to produce frozen fish sticks. Some tropical fish are already living in zones that are at their uppermost tolerance, already being 40 Celsius. Obviously, that's what leads to things like coral bleaching. So our seas, our rivers, our lakes are warming, and a lot of fish can't cope with this. It's not like other animals that can move further north. If you're a fish, you're stuck in the water. You can't go anywhere. So quite harrowing stuff. But one species that has returned to the British coastline is the bluefin tuna. And my guest is passionate about tuna. Now, Tom Horton is a PhD student at the University of Exeter and has been involved with the Tunnus UK project from its inception. Now, we spoke a little bit about the history of tuna in the British seas, their commercial value, some of them going for millions of pounds, and really what it involves to go out and try and find them. So it was an amazing chat to have with Tom. Here's how we got on. Thanks for joining me, Tom.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No worry. So we have met before. You remember that?
Was it at one of the events?
It was, I think it was FSBI. They had a thing in
Oh, was
Exeter.
it?
I think so. A few years ago. I don't know what it was. It was Steve Simpson. Do you know Steve Simpson? Do you work with him?
Yeah, I'm kind of recalling. It was a
And
conference, wasn't
he
it?
introduced us
On
because
campus.
you came up to me and you're quite a big guy, and you said, you know my girlfriend. And I shit myself. I was like, oh Jesus Christ, what's happened? And then you went, no, because you filmed with Nina. Because I did some work with Shad with Nina a few years ago. So I was like,
Yeah,
whew,
that's
okay,
right. Of
that's all right
course.
then. I thought that's why I was going to get in trouble for something I hadn't done.
No, no, not at all. No, it was a few years ago, wasn't it? Was it
That was a few
2016?
years ago. I think it was
Yeah, yeah.
2017 or something like that. But obviously, since then, or you might have been doing work with Tuna then, but since then you've gone on to work on this project, which is Project Thunnus. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, it's Tunnus UK, but it's a close. It's one that kind of divides the pack because yeah, the H in it always messes people.
Okay, so before we get on to that, just tell me a little bit about bluefin tuna.
Bluefin are a large scombrid. Large is probably a bit of an understatement. Scombrids are teleos fish, so they've got bony skeletons. So they grow to sort of lengths in excess of 300 centimeters or 3 meters and weights in excess of 700 kilos. So I suppose if you wanted to draw a comparison, it would probably be better drawing it to a small vehicle rather than an actual animal. So they're massive, and they're famous for being quick. So very fast in the water, but they're almost also kind of infamous for having a fairly exorbitant price tag. So they are fished commercially, and they are a favourite food as sashimi, so sashimi. Since the sort of 1970s, 90% plus of bluefin that have been caught have gone to Japan and are eaten as sashimi. And as sashimi is obviously very small portions and high price tag per portion. Individual fish can fetch really silly amounts of money.
So that's not made up then. You know when you see these news articles and they go, "This fish was a million or whatever." That's not bullshit. They go for that, do they?
No, that is not bullshit at all. No, it is a little bit. It's never embellished, but they use that kind of like highest priced fish as sort of a baseline, which is obviously the wrong thing to do. Now, what happens every year is bluefin are individually auctioned off at the Tsukiji fish market in Japan, Tokyo. And at the beginning of the season, so there's several different species of bluefin. There's a Pacific species as well as an Atlantic species. Obviously, I work on the Atlantic one, being in the Atlantic. But the Pacific species spawn off Japan. And at the beginning of the Japanese kind of fishing season marks the beginning of the auctioning season, which kind of coincides with the beginning of the year. So the first fish to be auctioned off is always prestigious. And there's a gentleman who owns a chain every year. He refuses to let up on bidding for this first kind of like prestigious fish, and that's how they end up with these bonkers price tags, which is sort of $7 million for one individual fish. Now, if they were to do that for every single fish, I don't know what the exact figure is, but the price per unit of sushi, like per mouthful, would be in the thousands rather than anything else. So he 100% makes a loss on that fish every single year. It's always the same guy.
He just does it because he just wants to be the one to have the first tuna.
Yeah, exactly. So I suppose that, if you were a sushi aficionado and you were wanting to go and get the best sushi, then you'd probably go, right, well, who cares about it enough to pay several $1 million for a fish every single year and make a loss on it? And maybe you go there. I don't know. But it seems to work for him because he does it on a regular basis.
That's bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. Am I right in saying that they're one of the few warm-blooded fish?
Yes, that's right. They are endothermic. So they sort of share that ability. There's about 30 different species of fish which can do it. So typically, obviously, you're right, fish are what we know as ectothermic. And what that means is essentially their blood temperature mimics that of the water or the kind of environment around. And bluefin tuna, some lamnid sharks, so poor beagles and white sharks can also do it. Some species of swordfish have the ability to keep their blood temperature warmer, which affords them sort of several sort of super abilities. So with warmer blood, means they can increase their muscle output, means they can swim faster for longer periods of times, and their peak muscle output, so their peak strength, will be proportionally higher than it would be if their blood was cooler. They can also digest food quicker, so if they're warmer, then their enzymes in their stomach can act faster to work quicker to digest food, and that's important. Because actually, if you think about a big fish like a bluefin, and bluefin have to eat somewhere between 5 and 15% of their body weight every single day just to sort of meet their metabolic demands, they might not encounter prey all the time. So, good stuff like, bluefin, and you see on Blue Planet or something like that, that these fish find bait balls and there becomes this big feeding frenzy. Well, those bait balls aren't easy to come across in a lot of places. So it actually makes sense if a bluefin can kind of digest food fast and then come back for more. Otherwise, the bait was gone. And then additionally, sort of the final one is that they can actually inhabit colder places, and that really kind of underlines a little bit of why the north. So contrary to popular belief, actually, this isn't sort of a northward range expansion, seeing bluefin off the British Isles. And in fact, they've been seen much, much further north than this, off the coast of Iceland, and even Norway. And that's a sort of long-standing thing. So these kind of warm-blooded fish can actually go to areas where it's particularly cold, and they can also dive deep as well. Obviously, it's much deeper and it's much colder in deeper waters. And bluefin are quite fantastic divers as well as long-distance migrants. So long-winded answer to your question. They are warm-blooded, and it's pretty neat.
Definitely. So what's their history in the UK? Because I've only looked into it a little bit, but there was a fishery for them, I think, at one point, and then that sort of collapsed. I don't know if they completely disappeared. I mean, you'll know a lot more than me, but then they've sort of come back now. So what's the history of them?
Yeah, so you're right. So there was an aristocratic sports fishery for Atlantic bluefin tuna off the northeast coast, so off Scarborough, and that developed in the 1930s. It developed quickly, and people flocked from all over the world to try and catch a glimpse or try and catch one of the elusive, we call them the Yorkshire tunnies. And in fact, a lesser known point is that the United Kingdom actually held a world record for a rod and line caught bluefin tuna, which the gentleman that set the record, caught fish, actually took the record from a guy in Nova Scotia. I can't remember how big the fish was, several hundred kilos, but massive animals. But you're absolutely right. So the fishery kind of collapsed quite spectacularly in 1953, and the fish were essentially not ever really seen again after that season. And in fact, I think to this day, we, as part of the Tunnus UK project, we collect sightings from anywhere. In fact, people are welcome to submit sightings via our website, which is www.tunnusuk.org. And we've yet to hear of bluefin being seen off the Yorkshire coast recently.
Isn't that weird that there was so many off Yorkshire and then they've just never not recovered? It's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it is weird. There are a couple of caveats to it. So the first one is that the Yorkshire tunny was only ever really sort of found because of the commercial herring fishery. So at that period of time, there was it was the commercialisation of herring fishing. So steam vessels would steam off 20 to 40 miles offshore to the herring grounds, and they would fish for herring. And in the late 1920s, reportedly, the herring fishing boats would actually complain that the tuna were there. So they'd sort of report back about these monstrous nuisance fish that were just kind of in the way. And the story got back to a few fishermen, and then the fishermen would actually go out, sort of the aristocratic guys would go out with the herring fishing boats, which are big, sort of 15 to 20 metre steamers. And they'd use that as a mothership, and they'd launch a small skiff, and they'd actually just chuck a hooked bait in the water by the herring boat, and the tuna would come and take it. And they'd launch this small skiff, and essentially what would happen is that the wealthy gentleman on the rod at one end of the skiff would hold on to the tuna, and then a young man at the other end would do the majority of the work, but using his oars. So he'd paddle against the direction the tuna was swimming, and they'd just kind of do that until the tuna napped it out. But that, sort of digressing, that herring fishery collapsed as well. So tuna don't spawn off the British Isles, not that we know. So they're here to feed. They're sort of here to try and find some of that 5 to 15% of their body weight every single day. And you would surmise that if the food that they're here to eat disappeared, then they might not come back. Additionally, there was a commercial fishery for them in the North Sea at the time. So several nations, so Germany, United Kingdom to a small degree, but mainly Nordic fisheries. So Germany, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, all fished bluefin tuna quite heavily. And I mean, it wasn't just they disappeared from the Yorkshire coast, they disappeared from the whole North Sea. The reason it is still interesting is that actually bluefin have recently reappeared back to Nordic regions, so Sweden, Denmark, coast of Norway, but we are yet to see them in any sort of appreciable numbers off the northeast coast. However, and sort of as the work of the Tunnus UK project suggests, that there are an awful lot seasonally off the southwest, off of Atlantic-facing coasts.
So it's likely that they are in the North Sea. It's just maybe they're not being sighted yet, or I mean, it's a big place, isn't it? So
it is, yeah. It's a big place, and you could probably split it up into several different eco-regions if you wanted. I'd say they are in the North Sea, but they're not off the Scarborough coast.
Okay.
So they, the waters are between Sweden and Denmark. So the Kattegat, which is sort of an inshore, but a surrounded body of water adjacent to the North Sea in the northeast. Bluefin have been sighted there for the last 4 or 5 years, and incidentally, there's a sort of a tagging program which we collaborate with just out there working on bluefin tuna, and reports back are generally that bluefin are back in fairly appreciable numbers. Just how many there are? It's $1 million question. Literally, as we were just talking, yeah.
So you've mentioned. So what is Project Tunnus then? What's the kind of? I was saying, what's the point? That sounds a bit sharp, but what is the? What's it for?
Tunnus UK is an inter-organisational collaborative research programme on Atlantic bluefin tuna, and it's between CFAS, and the CFAS project leads are David Wrighton and Jeroen van der Kuij. And so CFAS is the Centre for Environment, Fisheries and Aquaculture Science. The University of Exeter, and so my colleagues Matthew Witt and Lucy Hawkes run the project here. And additionally, we work with the Tuna Research and Conservation Centre of Stanford University, and as I was saying, colleagues in Denmark and Sweden as well. And really, the purpose of the Tunnus UK project is to provide a baseline understanding of Atlantic bluefin tuna off the coasts of the British Isles, which was previously lacking. And the reason for the project sort of being established, the rationale, I suppose, is that for the first time in probably a generation, bluefin have been regularly sighted from about 2014 onwards, and we just didn't know very much about them. And so we put together a proposal and sort of proposed it to government. So we're funded by DEFRA. We've had funding from the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund. And yeah, in 2018, we set about trying to find out a little bit more.
Amazing. So how has the angling community responded to the return of bluefins? Because you can imagine a lot of them kind of wetting their lips over all these bloody great big fish coming back to the British coastline.
I think that's probably fair to say, yeah. And I mean, the angling community, I think, how have they responded? Probably, I think it's fair to say they responded in a manner as you'd expect an angling community to respond. They want to go out and catch them. I think it's fair to say that, to our knowledge, most people aren't necessarily interested in going out and sort of contributing to this commercial fishery, and it's more of from the people that we interact with, people want to go and catch and release these fish. And catch and release angling has many virtues. And one of the kind of additional goals of the Tunners UK project at the moment is actually just to have a look at how the whole kind of catch and release, to look at the viability of the fishery, but just to sort of provide that information if people were to be interested in it. How do we do that? One of the main goals about the Tunners UK project was to look at onward migrations and behaviour of bluefin once they left our shores, and also to ask questions such as, how long do they spend, for instance, in the English Channel? Where do they go when they leave here? Do they enter known spawning regions, which is how we might be able to assign a bluefin tuna here to a stock of origin? So we actually had to go and work with the angling community to be able to catch tuna, to put electronic tags on them to be able to track their onwards movements or their behaviour. So the whole capture process is something that we've all, as a scientific team, have had to learn over the last few years. So we've learned a lot in that respect, and the fishermen that we work with have been incredibly receptive to the science that we're doing as well, and most people are really fascinating because I suppose ultimately they are pretty radical fish.
That's an understatement. They are incredible, aren't they? But am I right in saying that they're illegal for anglers to target? They can't go out and specifically get them, can they?
Yeah, it's a great point, which we should absolutely make very clear, is that it is illegal for anglers to go and target these fish. So we work under a specific catch derogation from the Marine Management Organisation, and additionally, as part of our kind of scientific licence, which institutions have, and then our project leaders have personal licences to go and conduct work as per the UK Home Office. We are incredibly careful to make sure that welfare of the animal is the highest standard possible. So every step of the process that we take, from how the fishermen go and fish, to then how long the fish spend on the hook, to the gear you actually use to catch the animal, to then how you bring it towards the boat, and then how you do the tagging, and how you release it and revive it. So we're very, very careful to make sure how we're interacting with the animal is the most sympathetic as possible, whilst still being able to achieve our scientific aims, but then also to be continually learning. So we review everything that we're doing at the end of each season, during the season and at the end of the season. And yeah, so far it's touch wood, the results we've had back have been fantastic. The number of fish that we've released have led us believe that anything has affected them too negatively, and they seem to have resumed normal behaviour quite quickly. And similarly, we have seen evidence of spawning in several of the fish that we've released. Several's getting ahead of myself, a couple. So entering spawning ground, because it's you only get one shot at doing this, and the information you get back only gives you several parameters, albeit incredibly powerful parameters. We're happy with how the fish have sort of behaved post-release, and we would assume it to be relatively normal.
Because I did hear about the odd. I mean, it's hard to prove, isn't it? But like the odd shark fishing charter that would, inverted commas, accidentally catch tuna, but it's difficult to police, I suppose.
Yeah, it is difficult, and I think for the record, Jack kind of gave bunny ears there. Accidentally catches them, and it's not for us to judge whether that goes on or how much of it goes on. But the reality is that sharks and tuna do eat the same stuff sometimes, and I know it does happen. But similarly, I think the point remains that this is a new animal here. There are genuine interactions between fishers, both commercial and recreational, and bluefin tuna. And I think the desire at the moment is just to make sure that those interactions are as sympathetic to the animal's health as possible. So if people can release tuna in good health, then that's absolutely the thing they should be doing. And additionally, the mandate is it's obviously illegal to target them, but if people do catch them by accident and the interaction doesn't go so well for the tuna and they end up with a mortality, then that mortality should be immediately reported to the marine management organisation. And what tends to happen in those instances, and it is rare, we maybe get 3 or 4 of those a year. So the University of Exeter CFAS take it as an opportunity to actually conduct a post-mortem, and actually we can take an awful lot of samples from a deceased animal that we can then use in future research. We try not to waste opportunities, and yeah, so that them's the rules, I suppose.
And do you think, I mean, I guess this is a long road now, but do you think there'll ever be scope for a commercial fishery of these fish in Britain, or is even that a good idea or a bad idea?
It's not really a conversation we'd ever weigh in on. I think that the key point is that we as a nation feed back into the whole management process. So bluefin tuna is managed as 2 spatially discrete stocks by an eastern stock and a western stock in the Atlantic, and the management is done by the International Commission for Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. And that organisation works by each member state, so EU, for instance, Morocco, America, because these fish transcend international boundaries. And as long as each nation that has bluefin tuna off their coasts conducts valid and useful research and feeds it back into a stock assessment process, ultimately any commercial fishery is managed by ICAT, not by the UK or the EU or any other nation. As long as we can feed back into the process and make sure that actually the fishery is managed sensibly. What I mean by that, the total catches set for a season are reasonable and not out of line of scientific advice, then that's the best thing we could do. So I think that, like I say, we won't be lobbying for one way or the other down here. Our position is very neutral, and it's about ecology and making sure that there's a few more of these fish swimming around in the water than there were before we started.
But what attracted you to study these fish?
I guess I just find them fascinating. Yeah, I mean,
that's good. If you said they were boring,
in general.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're fascinating. I've been fortunate to work with some fantastic people along the way, and I think that always helps with these things. And there's still so much more to learn. I suppose one of the extra fascinating things with bluefin is that you can't ever ignore the human element. So there are all these other interesting questions that go alongside the ecology of the animal. But I suppose one of the bottom lines is that there's few things in my mind that beat being out at sea and seeing a big group of bluefin feeding up on a bait ball. It is truly a kind of blue planet moment, and I'm very fortunate that the path that it's taken me allows me to see that every now and again. And incidentally, that we're talking about. I'm talking to you from Falmouth at the moment, and I can see that from a short boat ride from the harbour down here, which a lot of second, third generation Cornishmen have never seen in their lives before. So it's a truly fascinating spectacle.
Do they come close in then, or are they mainly kind of more further out?
Yeah, no, they have been known to come within sort of several meters of water.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so we actually, in addition to the sort of fisheries-based interactions we get reported every year, we also get just strandings. So bluefin that have ended up on a beach, and it could even be so. Essentially, the backstory to some of those are the fish are in fantastic condition. We sadly haven't been able to go and sample any of them or conduct post-mortem, but the physical appearance isn't of a fish that's being caught in a net or anything else that you can deduce from a picture anyway. But every year we've been sending pictures of 2 meters, and I guess they come in and they chase prey. But typically when we're fishing for them, it could be anywhere from sort of 1 to 10 miles offshore. But again, that very much varies with location. Other places in the world, if you wanted to go and catch or target tuna, you might have to go an awful lot further. And I suppose it really just reflects the nature of how the bait fish in kind of off the southwest behaves.
I did see I suppose it must have been a bait ball, but it was off Gillingvase Beach in February. I don't know if that would be too late for tuna. Would you still get them then?
I think it's the tail end of what we'd call the season, but I think that we have had reports in February, sort of bona fide, checked out records of bluefin. So no, it's totally reasonable, and I think it goes back to the kind of their ability to stay in cold places. We do definitely have records of fish up at this latitude around that time of year, and you'd imagine if there was enough food here to be able to sustain them, then they might still be here. But typically, our kind of what we're understanding now is the kind of the season in inverted commas runs from sort of about now until sort of November, December, and outside of those times, you might find a few, but maybe not quite the amount that you might see on a kind of peak season day, if you will.
Right, because I saw there were definitely common dolphins there, but then every now and again you just see a big. I mean, maybe it's me dreaming of tuna, but I just would see the odd big splash, and I'm just looking through my bins, and it's just like, oh, what's that one? And you just don't know. And maybe I think I was wishing too hard for tuna, but
I think often that is all you see. And before I started my PhD at the University of Exeter, I worked for Marine Discovery, who are a wildlife tour operating boat down in Penzance. It's Hannah and Duncan Jones that run that. We'd see bluefin, and we'd get quite excited, but they're the worst species to encounter on a wildlife watching trip, because you kind of see a splash, you're like, oh, it's a bluefin tuna, and you start talking about them, and that splash that maybe no one saw is all you get to see. So there's this incredible animal swimming around that people would be really interested in, but actually, unlike dolphins and whales and stuff, they obviously don't have to come to the surface to breathe. So you kind of you're left wanting at the end of it.
they're teasers.
Yeah, absolutely, teasers.
What's the success rate out of interest? Like, if you're doing these tours, like how often would you see tuna?
It's hugely variable. So we have now done the Sunnis UK project. We've probably done about 50 days at sea. So bearing in mind, in that instance, we are out specifically to find tuna, and we'd move around all day looking. Of those approximately 50 days, there's only a handful of days when we've not seen tuna. So maybe 2 or 3 days that we just simply haven't seen any fish at all.
Oh, that's a great success rate then.
Yeah, it is. I mean, catching them is very different. So,
yeah.
And it's much harder to catch tuna. It's not simply a case of seeing them and you'll catch them. But we don't need to talk about that now. But it's when they're around, it's they're everywhere, and it's really quite remarkable to the point where there was a day at sea. I think perhaps it was in the 2018 season, and we were out looking for tuna, and we could see them everywhere. We counted hundreds of them that day. And I had a call from Hannah and Duncan in Mounts Bay telling me they, we should go over there because there are tuna everywhere. And I was like, there's tuna everywhere here. And then someone else called me from the North Coast and said, there are tuna everywhere. And this is, simultaneous to us seeing them on the South Coast. So I think there are periods of time when there is a phenomenal amount of there. But then these fish are capable of moving a couple of 100 kilometers in a single day. So one day could be, lots and lots of fish around, and then the following day there could be very few around. But I mean, the other big caveat here is that we're obviously relying on seeing a non-air breathing animal on the surface, so it's there could just be days when they're simply not up.
They're remarkable creatures, and I'm sure many people probably don't even realise that we've got these 800-pound or whatever it is tuna swimming off our coastline. So I think it's absolutely fantastic, and I could waffle about fish with you all day, but I think I better cut the podcast at some point. So look, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Tom.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, Jack. And similarly, if people want to learn more about the project, then the website is www.tunnus, which is THUNNUSUK.org. And incidentally, if people have seen a splash at the surface, and it could just be your kind of like slightly bigger thrash in the midst of dolphins, and they think they've seen a tuna, then you can also submit sightings via the website as well. And we're really grateful for any bit of information that people can offer up. And additionally, we run a public event beginning of every year to try and share some of the information that we've gathered as part of the project. And we'll share information via the website as well. So if people are interested, then you can find out some stuff by the web, but also you can come and sort of meet the team and find out what's been going on down in sunny Cornwall in February.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place in Feb, just pissing it down with rain most of the time, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Well, look, take care, buddy.
Cheers, Jack. Nice one, mate.
I find it just amazing that there could be tuna the size of a car swimming around the Cornish coastline, or indeed the British coastline. So, absolutely phenomenal stuff. Now, that brings me on to Nature Reserve of the Week. And I was trying to think, what nature reserve could you do for tuna? Because it's just really the sea. I thought, well, that's quite a big nature reserve to cover. So I'm going to be a little bit more specific. And I'm going to talk about AK Wildlife Cruises. This is going to sound like they're paying me to say this. I'm not. I've just picked one at random, but this was one based in Falmouth. Now, it's run by Captain Keith. AK Wildlife Cruises is one of many that run out of Cornwall, though this one is based in Falmouth. Now, the boat itself has indoor seating area with modern toilet facilities and open outdoor seating. And I think this is fairly typical of most of these sort of wildlife cruises. If you go around most of the harbours and ports in Cornwall now, there's something like this that you can go out and see wildlife that ordinarily would be very difficult for the public to see. Now, depending on the time of year, there's a whole host of possible species that you could see, though summer is probably going to be the most productive, with basking sharks, sunfish, barrel jellyfish, minke whales, multiple species of dolphin like whitebeak, bottlenose and common, not to mention seabirds like Manx shearwater, puffins, northern divers, razorbills, and of course, if you're very lucky, you might see tuna as well. Now, if it's too rough to go out to sea, you can go up the Carrick Roads, exploring the creeks with seals, deer, inshore cetaceans. Some of the dolphins and porpoises come in good numbers, and of course there are lots of waders along there as well. So there's always an option to go see wildlife on these little boat trips. One tip just I would say from going on, I've not been on this particular boat trip, but there are lots, I've been on others similar to it. Always take warm clothes and waterproofs, even if it's hot and sunny, because you're going to get soaked. So not all the time, it depends how fast they go and how choppy it is, but it's always better to have warm clothes. You can take them off. There's nothing worse than being out at sea and you're cold, because there's nothing you can do about it. You're out there. Likewise, if you're hungry or you're thirsty, you're stuck. So you know, make sure you take something to eat, take some water, particularly in the colder months. And binoculars are always worth a shout, because the boat isn't going to go necessarily right up to these animals. Sometimes the dolphins will bow wave, which is lovely, but a lot of these animals can be shy, and they don't. And most responsible boat owners are not going to ride right up to them and disturb them. So I've picked on AK Wildlife Cruises for this one, but pretty much any of the Cornish wildlife watching boat trips are well worth a look. There's such a plethora of species you could potentially see. So if you're down in Cornwall, head out on a boat, and it is like Blue Planet sometimes. Some of the amazing wildlife spectacles that you can see are just absolutely unreal. Hopefully you've enjoyed today's podcast. As always, you can check out the highlights on the YouTube channel Wildlife Exposed TV, where you can actually see the videos of me chatting to the guests. There is a Twitter account @TipBearded, so please give that a follow. And if you're enjoying the podcast, let me know. Any questions, any kind of feedback, get in touch. I'm always happy to hear all that. This has been the Bearded Tits Podcast. I've been your host, Jack Perks, and I will catch you in the next one. Cheers.